On October the 30th, 1923, the circus was in town, setting up on a field close to Walton Village Hall. On this day, a child would change the fate of the circus forever. Young Gary Russell had queued all day to get a ticket for the circus. He'd been saving his pocket money for weeks. He paid a penny for a ticket and also bought a circus poster as a souvenir. He took his seat and the show was about to start. The first act were the clowns. Gary and the rest of the audience laughed as they came in dressed as firemen on a wooden fire truck. Gary was on the edge of his seat. The three clowns were getting up to their usual tricks and jokes, throwing custard pies at each other, and then one picked up a pail of water. One of the clowns was stood next to where Gary was seated. The clown ducked as the water was thrown at him. The water went all over Gary, who was soaked. The audience laughed some more. The clown, noticing Gary was all wet, took his hand and pulled him into the ring. The clown then shouted to the audience, "Look everybody, this little boy has wet himself!" The audience began laughing at Gary. Gary began to get angry with embarrassment. He pulled away from the clown and ran off towards the door crying. The audience found this even funnier and laughed more and more. Gary ran out and hid round the back of the circus tent crying. He could still hear the clowns performing and the audience laughing. In Gary's hand he still had the circus poster. Near to where Gary was sitting he saw a juggler. He had just been practicing with batons that were on fire. He had put the batons on the stand, but they were still alight. Gary, without thinking, grabbed one of the batons and set fire to the poster, determined to burn the picture of the clowns. The fire began to spread. Gary tried to stamp out the flames, but they caught onto the autumn leaves. Next to the juggler's stand was a bucket. Thinking it was a bucket of water, Gary picked up the bucket and threw it on the fire. But instead of putting it out, the fire raged. The bucket had contained petrol that the juggler had used to keep his batons alight. The flames had now caught the side of the circus tent. One wall was already engulfed in flames and was spreading fast. To begin with, the audience thought it was part of the clown's show, but then panic set in. The audience tried to get out and running for the entrance. Gary managed to get away and watched in horror as the circus burned to the ground. On that day, 45 people died in the fire. The 3 clowns were assumed dead, their bodies never found. The circus never performed again. The site where the circus had been was left unused. Eventually, it became a rubbish tip. Then, in 1972, it was decided by a local scout group they would buy the land and build a scout hut. The ground was levelled off and the foundations were laid, and the building was put up. The scout hall was almost finished. A hole was dug to connect the water supply. At the bottom of the hole, a small box was found by a builder. He opened the strange box, and in it was 3 red clowns' noses. He put the box in the kitchen area and carried on with his work. When he came back later, the box and the noses had gone. On the 30th of October 1972, the scout hut was officially opened. The day was rounded off by a large campfire. As the fire was lit and began to burn, a strange noise could be heard. It was a noise of laughter and then chanting. When the fire burnt out, amongst the ashes were some pieces of unburnt wood. The wood appeared to be round like tent poles. Printed on one of the poles it said, "Property of the Lion Circus Company." The poles were laid in the shape of 45. Over the next 45 years, every 30th of October, strange things seemed to happen in the Scout Hall. Things getting moved around, items disappearing. Some even said they heard laughter. Years later, Gary Russell returned to the Scout group as a Scout leader. He never forgave himself for what happened on that day, and was plagued with bad dreams of clowns. He hoped by becoming a Scout leader he could somehow make up for what he had done. Last year, Mrs. Smith, a cub leader, was locking up when she suddenly saw a light come on. Thinking that perhaps she had left it on or that it was faulty, she went back in to check. This is what the CCTV that night recorded. The police were called, but no signs of clowns or anybody could be found.